Well, welcome back. We are day three, Wednesday. We're covering high schools and really still focused on kids. This is Ready to Play Week, brought to you by ShareWaves and the Will to Succeed Foundation. We're so excited today to be able to close our show with one of the strongest leaders in the nonprofit community. Dr. Dred Scott took on the challenge of leading Boys and Girls Clubs a little over 2 years ago, and he is in really putting his mark on this organization, raising it to a level that not only looks good, but also is doing incredible work with our kids. I want to welcome Dr. Dred Scott. Welcome to our show.
Hey, thank you, Bill. Very, very happy to be here. And man, what an introduction. I think we should just stop rolling tape now and we'll just leave it as is.
I've always been impressed with your attitude. You've taken a really, I would say, tempered approach to what you were challenged with. When you first got to Boys and Girls Club, it wasn't like it wasn't functioning. It was working. It was doing its job. But your vision is different. Will you kind of just talk about what you've been able to do since you've gotten there? And then basically before COVID, what were your plans? What was happening?
Yeah. So for those that are tuning into this, just to make them aware of my background. So I'm a public school educator by trade. So I'm a former teacher and building principal and executive director, and then spent 10 years as deputy superintendent in the independent school district. And so I've got over 21 years in public school education and wasn't necessarily looking to do anything different. But this great opportunity opened up to lead the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Kansas City. And it was a tremendous opportunity for me to give back to the community that I was born and raised in. So I'm a proud Kansas City native and have played and have walked and have even gotten into a little bit of trouble on the same streets that the kids that we're serving today are living on, playing on, and, growing up on. And so it's a great way for me to give back. And so my goals coming into this position was to raise the brand awareness for this great organization. We do so many wonderful things to set kids up for successful futures, but we're not well understood. I think people have a good emotional reaction when they hear Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Kansas City. But if you were to ask them details about our work, very few could probably give you the core of what we focus on and what we do. So it's very important for me to raise that awareness around the community. We should be, and we're working towards being the youth development leaders in the community. So when there are questions and issues that arise related to kids, I want us to have a seat at the table. I want us to be top of mind. So we're working towards that.
And I don't want to get too far into this. I've been doing this for 2 years, learning about kids and using sports to connect to kids. But it seems like people think that kids are just going to be all right. Do you get that sense that people just don't even think that kids are having issues?
Yeah, unfortunately, many times the kids are an afterthought. So you asked me about, kind of operating in the pandemic. I think our community did a great job going into the pandemic of, being on the same page and supporting some of the mitigation strategies that needed to happen in order to flatten the curve and prevent, widespread of the coronavirus. So the business community and government sectors, they work together well. But one of the things that I noticed going into that is kids and nonprofits who typically, take care of kids and those people that need us most in the community. They were kind of left out of that conversation. It was an afterthought. What do we do if schools are closed, and what happens to kids if they can't go to school? They're not getting the food that they would normally get at school. They're not getting the supportive services, the social emotional support through schools. Well, what happens to them? So yeah, a little bit. Sometimes kids can be an afterthought. I'm a firm believer that kids are incredibly resilient, but we also have to recognize that they experience the same anxieties, the fears, the stress that adults experience, but they often don't have outlets in order to effectively deal with those. So, yeah, we've got to keep kids top of mind.
So paint the picture for my listeners. The I keep saying all week that the support networks that are normally there for families to turn to during this time are either broken or at lower capacity than normal. There's an emergent need for childcare. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. So, yeah, and I've been encouraging people to, instead of using the word childcare, I'm encouraging people to use the term child development and youth development.
Okay.
Because I think childcare, going along those lines of kids will be okay, I think childcare is associated with babysitting. And so we know that especially our school age kids, they need so much more than just babysitting. They need a supportive environment. They need a whole child development structure that helps them to continue to mature and to grow and to learn as much as they can without disruption. So this pandemic has really shined a light on the fact that, working parents, those that don't have the luxury of working remotely and, logging in to their workspaces from home, those people have to get out. They have to be interactive in the public. They're working on the front lines. And they want the best for their kids. And they know in many cases, leaving their kids at home unsupervised, especially our young ones, is not a good thing. And so they rely on, great child development and youth development programs in order to kind of be there as a, pseudo parent, making sure that their kids are developing the way that they're supposed to.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I feel like the kids that are there, that are out there, we need to connect to them. We need to make sure that they are getting what they need. You have been able to bring a lot of kids back into your facilities. Talk about the process that you went through when you first decided to shut down and what that meant, and then how you've been able to come back online and provide some in-person help. And then also, what have you done virtually to connect to kids?
Yeah. So, Bill, I remember like it was yesterday when we had to make the difficult decision to not allow kids in the clubs. It goes back to March 16th. And it was a decision that I didn't make lightly because I recognize the important role that we play in the lives of our kids. So when we made that decision, I felt like it was important for us to pivot and leverage our resources so that we could continue to stay true to our mission. It would just have to be more in an outreach capacity. So one of the things we did right away was developed a meal service program. We were one of the first organizations in the Kansas City Metro that began serving meals to families for free. We're serving hot breakfast and lunches to families going back to March 16th all the way through today. And so we've served over 40,000 meals since mid-March to families in need, families of school-age children and even early childhood children, because 30 million kids across the United States rely on free and reduced lunch from schools for sustenance. That's the majority of their meals for a day. So when schools shut down, there's an automatic food insecurity gap that is created. And I knew that. And so we were able to leverage our great resources in order to do that. So I'm very proud of that.
It's a testament to your leadership. I think that people think, leading a nonprofit organization is something that people do to retire or to,
Yeah.
they've decided that, they've fulfilled their career path and now they want to give back. And that's not a bad reason to serve, but
Sure.
True leaders take us through crisis and help us navigate through the hard times, and also build a team of people that can be nimble and adjust to the recurrent idea that everything's changing every single day so fast. Talk about your team and how you guys have adjusted and what's happening this summer.
Yeah, yeah. So I've got a tremendous team, and to your point about kind of the assumptions made regarding nonprofit leaders, what I've found coming from public school, that sector, is the nonprofit sector includes some of the brightest and most talented individuals I've ever had the pleasure of working with. And then on top of that, encompassing all of that, they're extremely passionate about what they're doing. They wouldn't be in the work, they wouldn't be in the community if they were not. So, yeah, let's give credit where credit is due. We've got some leaders in the nonprofit world that are really making a difference and are phenomenal leaders. And I'm working my way towards that for sure.
You're one of them.
Thank you. So, I will answer your question, but I want to make sure that I paint a full picture of what we did during the pandemic. So the meal service was just one aspect of what we did. We also did weekly wellness check calls with our members. So that means we had our great staff, our professional staff, picking up the phone, touching base with every one of our members at least once a week to check on their overall well-being. So we talked a little bit about social emotional needs for kids. We wanted to make sure that we maintained that great connection so that they knew that the relationships that they had with our youth development professionals and our mentors within our program still existed, and we cared about them and we were there for them during these very difficult times. And we had a tremendous response, not only from our kids, but also from our parents related to that. And that's something that we are continuing even to this day. And then lastly, you talked about kind of virtual or online opportunities. We did develop very quickly an online platform, a programming platform for our members. They can log on, they can receive academic support and enrichment. They can receive, leadership activities and suggestions, also community service type activities and suggestions, and then helping them explore the arts as well. So that virtual platform through our My.Futures website is something that continues today. But overall, my team is fantastic. They were right there. I'm going to use your word. They were very nimble in their response and saying, yes, this is what we need to do in order to be here for kids. So we kind of navigated the waters successfully during the stay-at-home orders. And as things started to reopen, I wanted to be sure that we were one of the first organizations that were willing to step up and say, we recognize the child care gap that exists across Kansas City Metro, and we're going to be here for our folks that are first responders and are working on the front lines that need that great place for kids to be while they're at work. And so we did reopen our doors on June 1st for our summer program. We call it Atomic Blast.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it's a blast. It's a STEM focused and project based learning program that really is meant to prevent what we call in education the summer slide. Mm-hmm. Essentially, there's research out there that shows that kids can lose as much as 3.5 months of their kind of education during the summer if they're not effectively engaged. And so that's what our Atomic Blast program is aimed at. Now, we are operating in, kind of uncertain times and uncharted waters. One of the things that we've had to kind of deal with is a lower capacity because of some of those social and physical distancing guidelines that have been set up by the local municipalities and health departments. So we're operating at about 1/3 of the capacity that we normally expect to see. But my opinion is having 1/3 of the kids in person and supporting them is better than zero. So we're making that situation.
So the 2/3 that you're not actually being able to serve in person, you still have connections with them.
Yep.
They still have an opportunity to connect. Are you differentiating between your groups of who gets in and who doesn't?
We are
at more crisis situations.
We are. So we had to prioritize that enrollment because of the low capacity numbers. And so and I referenced this earlier, we wanted to focus on the children of first responders and those that are essential workers. So That was the first category. Then secondly, for the in-person programming, we had to adjust the age range that we're working with. We typically work with ages 5 to 18, so that's kindergarten all the way up to high school. We had to kind of shorten that to ages 5 to 12, so that's essentially kindergarten up to about 8th grade. But with our teens, and we'll talk about this later because I know you want to talk about some of the racial and social justice kinds of things that we're dealing with as a community. We are well connected with our teams through our virtual programming and then giving them ad hoc opportunities for in-person support.
That's great. That's and I just read yesterday, you opened up your doors to kids 13 through 18 to come in and talk in person, face to face, and really share their ideas, their thoughts, their fears, their anxiety, and talk about that experience. I bet that was timely, and important, but probably I bet you learned a lot too.
Absolutely. So Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Kansas City serves more Black and brown children than any other youth serving organization across the Kansas City Metro. So when issues affect the Black and brown community, we know that it has a direct effect on the kids that we serve. And so it's important for us to be in tune with what the concerns are and be in tune with where the need is. And so we recognize right away that, this movement, this outrage, this outpour for change because of the murder of George Floyd, we knew that, we would have kids and families that would be engaged and emotional and frustrated about that situation. So
because you probably felt the same way.
Absolutely, Bill. Absolutely.
I felt the same way.
Yeah, I mean,
I wanted someone to talk to.
if you're a living, breathing human being, you have an ounce of care that exists in your body, then yeah, you would have a strong reaction to that. That's a normal reaction. But with our kids, again, as I stated earlier, sometimes they have those emotions, but don't have the outlet in order to respond to those. So that's why you see sometimes the vandalism and the violence, because they have all of this pent up emotion, but they don't have the constructive outlets to deal with it. So we provided that for them. So we reached out to our teams right away and let them know that we were going to establish these open dialogue sessions. They come in groups of 15 to 20, and we'd sit down and let them share with us what they're thinking, what they're scared about, what makes them anxious, and they could do so in a safe and judgment-free zone. And then we would talk about what they could do that would result in sustainable change. So how do you go beyond just showing up on the plaza holding a sign and really making a difference in your community? So we talked about things like getting your friends registered to vote and, putting together coalitions of community service groups to make a true difference. And what do we do to tamp down the violence that exists, the Black on Black and Black on brown crime that exists across the Kansas City Metro? So we're having all of those kind of conversations, and again, had a tremendous response from our kids. And this is not new territory for us. Again, we recognize that the kids that we serve, we help all kids, but particularly the kids that need us most. The kids we serve, they're dealing with these issues on a regular basis. They have opinions, they have thoughts, they have fears. They're incredibly astute. And so we need to be there as an organization to help them develop into leadership that results in the change we want to see.
Well, we're in the process of, continually defining who Sharewaves is going to be and what we are. And the one thing that has stuck out for me over the last 4 or 5 weeks is that, this idea that access is not available, sports is not available to certain demographics, certain low social economic situations, and that access is privilege. Boys and Girls Club does a really good job of helping connect kids with sports. And tell me, do the kids talk about the fact that they feel like they're limited in their access, or is that not one of their awareness points? Or are they not feeling that they're limited in their access to sports, or to opportunities, or to the way that they live over in that area over there? I mean, is that something that comes up in those conversations?
It does. I could really get on my soapbox about the whole pay to play situation that we have going on across our country. But with our kids, and you have to think about, again, we're serving, some of the lowest socioeconomic areas of our city. Our clubs are located in some of the toughest neighborhoods within the city. So with that comes a lack of amenities and a lack of access, to your point, to some of the youth sports programs that would be considered premier, or, that people talk about. And I think for our kids, they recognize that those programs exist, but it's almost like a faraway kind of dream for them. They think you have to be uber talented, and that, if you are, then you would be kind of plucked out of your situation and given this kind of once in a lifetime opportunity. I think for a lot of our kids, they don't see youth sports as a vehicle for growth and development, just, in general, but also in their sports careers. So
maybe there's an opportunity. Maybe there's opportunity for us to be a part of helping change that perception, because anyone you talk to that has played youth sports and used sports to take them into high school will tell you that it helped prepare them for life, and it gave them opportunities to do things that they wouldn't normally get to do, but also become, better teammates, and know how to work towards a goal, and all of the things that it takes to be a part of a team lend themselves to a career in just about any endeavor. So, yeah,
you're preaching to the choir, and the unfortunate thing is, because of that lack of access, then by the time kids hit high school, their skill level is it doesn't match what some of their more affluent and fortunate counterparts and classmates might have experienced.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to close that gap. We want to give kids the opportunity to develop those foundational skills in health and wellness overall. But then as they begin to get interested in sports, we want to support them in that effort as well.
That's why we make such great partners.
Exactly. That's right.
So, Ready to Play Week. I'm visiting with Dr. Dred Scott of the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Kansas City. He does a phenomenal job of painting a picture of what's happening with our kids right now. Ready to Play Week is all about bringing attention to how we're safely returning to our normal ways of life, and sports is one of those. Looking to the future and thinking about the rest of the summer for you guys. I just read, about your virtual week-long campaign and closing it out with a show from Casey Musgraves. What a great opportunity. Talk a little bit about how you've had to recraft one of the major events of the year for you guys, move it around, try to figure out some space, and finally make the decision to go virtual. And just so you know, I've been going virtual this whole week trying to raise money. It's not easy, but I'm here to help. So I'm going to add my talent and treasure and time to the endeavor to help make it a blast. But tell me a little bit about the shift in Kids Night Out.
Sure. Thank you. So yes, we are a nonprofit, and so we have to have a strong resource development department and arm in order to fund the work that we do. So Kids Night Out, it's our premier fundraising event for the organization. It typically happens in the month of April, and it's typically a live in-person event that incorporates a concert from kind of A-list entertainers out there. I mean, last year, this
Diana Ross.
Diana Ross. Yeah. And so people are still talking about that. So we're able to, secure Casey Musgraves, Grammy award-winning
My daughter
youthful.
is just out
Yeah,
the door. Yeah.
yeah, and she crosses so many,
Right.
genres and appeals to, a very wide audience. We were elated to be able to secure her this year. And then, as we were gearing up to put the final touches on the event, we were dealing with the pandemic. And so we, again, had to make a very difficult decision, recognizing that even if communities were opening back up, we could not necessarily I guess, assume that people would be comfortable coming out and being in a space with large numbers of individuals. So we transitioned to what we're calling an exclusive online broadcast event. It's going to be tremendous. It's August 1st. Casey Musgraves is going to give a private concert just for us. This is not something that is a film or tape that she has from some other event that we're reusing. She's doing this especially for us. And we're sprinkling into that, of course, opportunities for those that are participating to get better acquainted with our organization, our mission, our impact. We've got some fun little tidbits sprinkled in. We've got some games and things that will keep the viewers engaged. And we're also encouraging our sponsors to host watch parties. So they're going to invite, folks, their closest friends and colleagues over to enjoy the broadcast and then interact in that way. We'll have a live auction. We're already starting on kind of our silent auction. So those things are out there online and via social media. But we need the support of Kansas City in order to raise the funds that we need to keep our doors open and keep doing this great work. I've got a tremendous vision for where I want us to be over the next 5 years, and it's going to take some resources in order to do that. Kids Night Out incorporates or encompasses about 20% of our operational budget. So with the success of Kids Night Out goes the success of our organization. So it's an imperative that we get this one right and that we are successful.
Well, I'm sure it will be a successful event, and I do want to throw my hat in the ring to help any way that we can.
Thank you.
Obviously, 810 WHB and Union Broadcasting want to support that night in any way that we can. But also creatively, I'd love to sit down with your team and talk about some ideas that
Sure.
use to keep that entertaining and fun. It's not easy to keep people engaged, but we do live in a podcast world and a virtual world now. And everyone seems to know how to do these Zoom calls and make it work. So it should be wonderful. I've been a part of a couple virtual events so far, and they've all been successful. So let's make that one awesome. If you're out there in Kansas City and you want to learn more about Kids Night Out, you can go to the Boys and Girls Club's Facebook page. It's all over that, but also their website. What's your website?
Well, so I'm going to give you a website specific to Kids Night Out. It's www.kidsnightoutKC.com.
And following you guys on Twitter and on Facebook and all the socials, that's starting to really look really good. I love your Twitter handle. Let people know how they can follow to stay kind of up to date on what's happening with Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah, so I'm glad you noticed that, Bill. We put a lot of, there's some strategy behind that. It's something that I've called for. We want those constant drips of positive energy out there in social media land, in the Twitter sphere and other places, right? So we're very intentional about that. So if those that want to engage with us, if they would just follow at Help KC Kids, that's an easy handle. And then I've got my own personal handle I would encourage people to follow as well. That's at Dr. Dred Scott. That's DREDSCOTT. So I'm always linked up with what's going on across the organization. And so it's just a fun way to keep up with me and things that are going on as well.
Well, that's great. Well, let's close out with just a personal question about the impact this has had on you and your life, and obviously living with the name Dred Scott. You've had to, you've had to own that and live into it, grow into it. But still, we're still really far away from you feeling comfortable in your own skin, and that's not right. Talk a little bit about what that means to you, and what we can do, what I can do to make a difference.
All right, thank you. That's a great question, and I think a great way to end. I dealing with this racial and social justice situation that we find ourselves in as a nation and really as a world. I had to give a lot of thought to what it meant to me and the impact that this all has on me. And I was very reflective before responding publicly with my thoughts. But once I had a chance to do that, I decided that I would create an open letter, which I shared with my staff, I shared with my board, and some of our closest friends and allies. And in that letter, Bill, I talk about the fact that having the name Dred Scott really has set me up to have a unique perspective on not only race, but justice. So you think about Dred Scott, he was a Black man, an enslaved person who fought for his freedom through the United States Supreme Court, ultimately lost that decision, but it was one of those landmark cases that led to, many people say it was a precursor to the Civil War. So Dred Scott, obviously, there's a focus on race there because he was an enslaved African-American man. But then the justice side of things is the court system and everything that he tried to do in order to ascertain his freedom. So from before I can remember, probably since before I could walk and talk with full sentences, I knew the history of Dred Scott in that case. I've been to the courthouse in St. Louis where that case was argued at the state level. I've got all of the literature. I've spoken personally with Dred Scott's great-great-granddaughter. So there's a great legacy and history there that, I hold on my shoulders. When things like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and, the list goes on, when those things go on, my perception is just a little bit different because I've been ingrained since really day one to have this unique perspective. I think I recognize with this current movement, there's a difference in that people want real sustainable change. They're not going to be satisfied with just talk or, going and doing studies or pilot programs. They want to see real change at the local level, state level, and national level. I think the gap that I see that exists is that change is being called for by the youngest generation. So kids 13, 14, 15 years old, they're out there on the front lines protesting, calling for this change. So it's up to us, Generation Xers, even the boomers out there and, other folks to wrap our arms around this new generation and give them the tools that they need to organize and make sure that the change they're calling for really does happen. So what can you do? What can the larger community do? I think it is be sensitive to this topic and be willing to dialogue about this topic and also be willing to confront issues that we know exist across our community. It's no longer okay just to be silent and personally say, well, I don't agree with that. Well, it is, taking this anti-racism approach to make sure we're confronting those that may hold those horrible beliefs accountable and making sure that they understand it's not okay and won't fly in our community.
Well, and the courage of the young people is just, it's so inspiring. I don't know. I mean, it sounds kind of cliche, but these young people do have a voice and they do have an opinion and they're showing it.
They are.
And they're fueling the protest. I know in my household, the conversations have been real. They've been on the point. If I've said something wrong, my daughters call me out on it. You can't say it that way, Dad. Mm-hmm. And I'm proud of that. I'm glad that they are able to see it and sense it and are sensitive to it in more ways than obviously my generation, our generation. Obviously, I think that's part of our issue is we've walked around blinded. We've walked around not listening to what's really happening and thinking that it's okay to ignore it, and that we need more people to step up and say that's not right, and that's
Right.
not that can't happen. Well, I certainly have enjoyed getting to know you. The one thing that I learned early on in the opportunity to meet you and get more understanding of the Boys and Girls Club is that what Boys and Girls Club represents and what they do is like an iceberg. You only see the top 20% of it. All of the wealth of incredible impact is all underneath. If you take any time just to pay attention and to keep your eyes open, you'll see an organization that is impacting some of the most important people in our world. These kids are the MVPs. They're the most valuable people. And that investment is going to pay off. One last thing before we finish, and I just want to paint a picture for people of how big the problem is and how an organization like Boys and Girls Club looks at all of the kids that are out there that need assistance and help and struggles because of finances or because of the not being able to create enough to give. You guys are operating at 33% capacity. In normal times, you'd be meeting about maybe a fourth of the need, right? I mean, there's help me out here, but there's a lot of kids out there that need help.
Yeah, the need is great. And so on an annual basis, we touch and interact with over 8,000 youth across the Kansas City metro. So what that means is on a daily basis, we've got, anywhere from 12 to 1,400 kids pouring into our clubs. Now, I've got great plans, and we're working towards increasing that, doubling that number within the next 5 years because that need is so great.
Right.
And I think it's even going to be larger based on the impact of the pandemic and what that means for school calendars and enrollment. It could be that in order to cut down the number of kids that are in a school or a facility, that they being school districts, develop calendars that, only have about 50% of the kids present at any given time. So that means the other 50% would be engaged in some virtual learning platform, but they would be at home. And so as an organization, we are adjusting and making sure that our programming model meets the needs that come out of those changes. So there are going to be tens of thousands of youth across the Kansas City metro that need support. Right now, we're going to do everything we can to work with as many kids as we can. But there are literally thousands of kids that are out there. And for all of the kids that we work with, Bill, here's a little bit of data for you. The median household income for the families that we serve is less than $24,000 a year. So
And that's
think about that.
Outside of a pandemic.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. And so think about that.
Yeah.
So a family that is dealing with that financial picture is already behind, some of our more affluent neighbors. And so we have to be here for our kids. We have to invest. You said it earlier, because it will pay off. We want to give them those opportunities that they're not going to access otherwise because they don't have those resources. And, I'm telling you, there are just so many gems and diamonds in the rough that exist across our community that just need that support, that love, that encouragement to do great and wonderful things. We've seen so many success stories coming out of our clubs, and we want to create more and more of those as we move into the future.
Well, that's what I want to do too. So we're going to partner in that. We're going to do great things together. I'm looking forward to the future with you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us for Ready to Play Week. We're raising money for situations just like yours, and we hope that we can write a big check to the Boys and Girls Club when this is all over. So, thank you for your time, and we will we'll be in touch. We're going to be working together a lot. So, thank you.
Well, honored to be here. Thank you for having me, and thank you for being someone that I can call a friend.
Yeah, thank you. You're listening to Ready to Play Week. That's Dr. Dred Scott, the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Kansas City, not a better man in the city. And we'll be back right after this. All right, man. That'll probably play this afternoon between 2:30 and 3 on 1510 and 94.5. And then we'll also package it up and produce it as a podcast. And we'll be able to share it across all of our socials, and you'll be able to share it. And I think we had some really good content. You were awesome. So,
all right, thank you.
Have a great morning. Go get busy. I took too much of your time, I'm sure.
No, it's all good. This is work. This is the important part of the work. So thank you again, Bill, for keeping us top of mind, and thank you for all your support.